The disturbing case of Katherine Night. Most lovers' quarrel end in an apology or worst-case scenario, a tumultuous breakup. But for Katherine Night, the mother of 4 children and an abattoir by profession, murder and gruesome cold-blooded mutilation were the only answer. Welcome to Lavender City. If you're new here, we would love to have you as a subscriber. Before we start, we would like to mention that our thoughts go towards everyone involved who fell victim to the horrible actions of Katherine Night. Trigger warning: the video may contain graphic details and instances of domestic abuse, flaying, rape, murder, cannibalism, and animal killing. Katherine Mary Night was born on October 24, 1955, in Tenterfield, Australia, and was raised in an unconventional and dysfunctional family environment. She and her twin sister were the children of a scandalous affair between Barbara Rowan and Ken Knight. Her mother, Barbara, was already married to Jack Rowan and shared 4 sons with him. In fact, Ken Knight was her husband's friend and co-worker, and when their secret rendezvous came to light, their small, conservative town was rocked to its core. The backlash that ensued forced Barbara to move to Moree with Ken and their daughters, while 2 of her sons stayed with their father, and the other 2 went to Sydney to be raised by an aunt. In 1959, Jack Rowan died, and his 2 older boys moved in with Barbara and Ken. Ken was an alcoholic who used intimidation and violence to keep his wife under control. It is alleged that he would rape his wife up to 10 times a day. Barbara would often tell her twin daughters the intimate details of her life and how much she loathed men and sex. Later on, when Katherine would confide in her mother that one of her partners wanted her to do a sex act that she wasn't comfortable with, she was told to put up with it and not complain. Knight also claims that she was a victim of sexual assault by several family members until she turned 11. However, her father wasn't one of them. In 1969, the Knights moved back to Aberdeen, where Katherine attended Muswell Brook High School. She's remembered by her classmates as a loner and a bully who would often terrorize smaller children. She assaulted at least 1 boy whilst at school with a weapon and was also injured by a teacher who claimed that he acted in self-defense, a claim that would be echoed by one of Katherine's partners in the future. By contrast, she wasn't consumed by her anger. She was a model student and often earned awards for her ideal behavior. At the age of 15, she dropped out of school to pursue a job as a garment cutter in a clothing factory. A year later, she left to start what she referred to as her dream job, cutting out the internal organs of offal at the local abattoir or butchery. Her skills were so good that she was soon promoted to boning and given her own set of butcher's knives. She loved her job so much and was so proud of her achievements that she hung that set of knives over her bed to keep them handy in case she ever wanted to use them. This was a habit she continued everywhere she lived until her incarceration, and eventually she did get to use her treasured knives. Katherine's string of toxic relationships began when she met David Kellett, a raging alcoholic, whilst working at the butcher shop. Much like her father, Kellett would engage in fistfights under the influence, and used to this kind of violence, Knight surprised her new beau by joining in on his drunken scuffles and defending him. He would soon realize that Knight could do more than a little damage with her strong fists, and before long, he found himself being dominated by her. Yet, this didn't stop the 2 from getting married, and in 1974, the 2 tied the knot and had a grand entrance to the service on Katherine's motorcycle. At the wedding, the heavily intoxicated Kellett was warned by Barbara, who noted that her daughter had a screw loose somewhere. That night, the warning would resonate true. On their wedding night, Knight and Kellett consummated their marriage 3 times, after which David fell into a stupor. But Katherine wanted to go at it once again, and when her husband rejected her advances as he was exhausted, she started to strangle him. He woke up with a start and managed to fight her off. Though their marriage had a murderous start, what with Katherine trying to kill him on their very first night as newlyweds, their union lasted for 10 more years. Their marriage was, however, as far from perfect as it could be. On one occasion, a heavily pregnant Knight burnt all of her husband's clothes and shoes and hit him across the back of the head with a frying pan. The reason? Kellett had come home late from a darts competition. Fearing for his life, he fled before collapsing in a neighbor's house from a severely fractured skull. While the police wanted to press charges, Katherine convinced her husband to change his statement and drop the charges. Shortly after the birth of their first child, Melissa Ann, in May 1976, he left home in the middle of the night and moved to Queensland to be with his mistress. Soon after, she was seen pushing her baby in a pram down the main street, violently throwing it from side to side. She was then admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital and diagnosed with postnatal depression. Once she was released a few weeks later, the truth about her husband's affair hit her again. The truth about her husband's affair hit her yet again, and she took 2-month-old Melissa and placed her on a railway track shortly before the train was due. Thankfully, a vagrant named Old Ted found Melissa whilst he was foraging near the railway line and rescued her. A few days later, Katherine slashed the face of a woman with her knives and demanded that she drive her to Queensland to find her husband. Though the woman escaped when they stopped at a service station, a delusional Knight has taken a young boy hostage by threatening him with her prized knife. At the Morisset Psychiatric Hospital, she told nurses that she had the intention of killing the mechanic at the service station because he had repaired her husband's car, which had enabled him to abandon her. On hearing about the incident, Kellett returned home to support his wife. She was released on the 9th of August 1976 into the care of her mother-in-law, and the family moved to Ipswich. In 1983, they had another daughter, Natasha Marie. The next year, Katherine ended things with Kellett and moved into a rented house in Muswellbrook, and when she injured her back and couldn't go back to work at the abattoir, she was given a housing commission residence by the government. In 1986, Katherine jumped into a whirlwind romance with a local miner, David Saunders. A few months in, he moved in with her and her daughters, but decided to keep his apartment in Scone, a fact that enraged Katherine. She soon became increasingly jealous and suspicious about what Saunders was up to when he wasn't around, and like all her previous relationships, this one also grew ugly and violent. In May 1987, she slit the throat of his 2-month-old dingo pup whilst he watched on with horror. She alleged that it was an example of what would happen to him if he ever had an affair, and then knocked him out with a frying pan. In June the next year, she gave birth to a third daughter, Sarah, and Saunders put a deposit on a house, which Knight paid off with her workers' compensation. She then decorated the home with animal skins, horns, skulls, rakes, pitchforks, and machetes, floor to ceiling. Following an argument in which she hit David on the face with an iron before stabbing him in the abdomen with a pair of scissors, he moved back to his apartment. He later returned home to find all of his clothes cut up and then went into hiding. When he returned to see his daughter, he was told that Knight had gone to the police and manipulated them into believing that he was a threat to her, which made them issue an apprehended violence order against him. Soon after, she met John Chillingworth, with whom she had her first son, Eric. They stayed together for about 3 years, and their relationship was seemingly peaceful, with no violent incidents being reported. But this was just the calm before the storm. Chillingworth and Knight ended their relation after the former discovered that she was having an affair with John Charles Thomas Price, the father of 3 children. His friends and neighbors thought of him as a terrific bloke who was well liked by everyone who knew him. He was well aware of Knight's violent reputation, but he still let her move into his house in 1995. His children liked her, and he was a good provider who made a lot of money working in the mines. In 1998, they fought over his refusal to marry her, and in retaliation, Katherine videotaped items he had allegedly stolen from work and sent the tape to his boss. Though the items were nothing but expired medical kits that Price had scavenged from the company's disposal site, he was fired from the position he had held for more than 17 years. A few months later, however, Price rekindled their romance but refused to let her move in with him. They fought more frequently than ever, and most of his friends distanced themselves from him as they wanted nothing to do with the unhinged Knight. In February 2000, a series of violent physical assaults on Price ended with her attempting to stab him in the chest. Finally fed up, he took out a restraining order on the way to work to keep her away from his kids and from him. That afternoon, he told his co-workers that he was concerned for his safety, and if he wouldn't turn up the next day, it would be because Katherine had murdered him. Despite their advice to not return home to her, he stated that she would kill his kids if he wouldn't do so. He arrived home to find that Katherine had sent the kids away to a friend's house for a sleepover. He spent the evening with his neighbors, returned home, and went to bed at about 11. Katherine had been busy the whole day too. She had bought new black lingerie and had taped her children whilst making comments, perhaps a crude will. She arrived at Price's home whilst he was asleep, watched television for a few minutes, and had a shower. She then woke him and had sex with him, and he fell asleep for the last time. At dawn the next day, a concerned neighbor and worker tried knocking on the bedroom window and alerted the police when they noticed blood on the front door. At 8 a.m., the police arrived to witness a horrific sight. Katherine Night had stabbed John Price 37 times with the butcher's knife. According to blood evidence, it seems that he attempted to escape, but she chased him through the house and dragged him back in when he managed to get to the front door. He bled out in the hallway, and Katherine went to Aberdeen and withdrew $1,000 from his account. She then returned home and expertly skinned him. She hung the flayed skin from a meat hook on the door's architrave and proceeded to decapitate Price. She cooked part of his body, including his butt cheeks, and served it with baked potato, beetroot, yellow squash, and gravy on 2 plates. She set the plates on the dining table with a place card next to them indicating it was for Price's children to eat. She also made herself a plate, but she couldn't eat it and threw it out on the back lawn. She then arranged the mutilated corpse by wrapping the left arm over an empty 1.25-liter bottle and crossing his legs, an act of possible defilement demonstrating her contempt for Price. Next, she lay down next to his body, took a large number of pills in an attempt to end her own life, and passed out. The police found Price's head in a warm pot with vegetables and a scathing, blood-stained handwritten note on top of a photograph of Price that was covered up with small pieces of flesh. Katherine was still alive, but when she woke up in hospital later, she claimed she had no recollection of the previous night. Her initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was rejected for reasons unknown, and she was arraigned on the 2nd of March 2001 on the charge of murdering Price, to which she pleaded not guilty. On October 15, 2001, she pled guilty and became the first woman in Australia to be given a life sentence without parole. She didn't show any remorse over her actions and was diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder. She is still serving her life sentence at the Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, refuses to accept responsibility for her actions, and claims she is innocent. That is all for today. Do you think that Katherine's childhood shaped the way she treated her partners? Do you think her actions could have stopped with early intervention? Comment below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and smash the notification bell to not miss a single video from us. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.